Hi, everyone. My name is Lady Somerled Ray. I come from the kingdom of Adenvelt. And full disclosure, I am not a peer. I have been kingdom shadowing once, and I wanted to bring this presentation to you because my goal when Master Fergus told us about this symposium was to interview a bunch of peers and get the messages that really needed to be communicated in a place that that could be communicated effectively. Okay, even though, obviously schedules and timing and all of that. So welcome to the do's and don'ts of welcoming newcomers into ANS. Okay, so this is me. This is Lady Summerlid Ray. I am not going to be using video during this presentation. However, for reference, that's all my stuff. Also, please feel free to connect with me. I will put my Facebook link in the chat at the end of the class. Okay. Here are our interviewed experts. We have an amazing peer from Meridies, Constanza, and then we have Master Richard from Aidenvelt and Mistress Matea from Aidenvelt as well. There are a few others who also wanted to contribute, but at the same time, they didn't necessarily want their face up on the PowerPoint. So um, all of them have indicated that if at any time you wanted to, look them up on Facebook or on the OP and try to connect, please feel free to. They're all very, very open to answer questions and to be there as representatives, guides, and mentors in any or in all of these things. So let's start our journey. Our journey will always begin as shadowlanes that a newcomer comes to a practice, an event, or a demo. Now what? Right? Now, there's a larger question here of a newcomer just shows up. We've already kind of addressed that in an earlier class. However, in this particular one, they've showed up and they're only interested in arts and sciences. That's it. They have questions, they are drilling down, they want to do something in arts and sciences. Okay, cool. Now what? We talk to them. Tell me your story. Right? We put the power in their hands to really guide what's motivating them. Why are they here? What interests you? Okay. We had an earlier class that really delved into helping to engage, right? Being a detective of enthusiasm, how to really interact at that level so that you can really help them to feel comfortable and safe to tell them for them to tell you their story. So once they have done that, once they are comfortable in telling you, well, gosh, I really liked doing embroidery over here, or right, you're starting to understand their story, not their life story, but what's brought them to this moment with you. Then we have to work on respecting their story. Okay. And I understand that this isn't a do or don't, but if we don't process how to respect their story, then the do's and the don'ts won't work. Okay. First, we have to listen to their story. When we're welcoming a newcomer, it's not about us, it's about them. It's never been about us. We're not selling the SCA. We're showing them how cool it is to go play and do these things with these people. That's true, but that's not selling. That's just us saying, this is fun to us. Okay. So we're listening to what they're saying. We are listening to what their hobbies are. And we're thinking, are there some SCA equivalencies? Maybe there are. Maybe there aren't. Maybe they're the ones that figure out what the historical equivalency is for the hobby that they're really interested in, or something that they want to bring from the mundane world into the SCA world. That's cool. We want to listen to how they identify. Okay, and I mean that in all of the modern respects, right? How do they want to be identified? Okay, how do they identify with what we're doing? How do they connect with blank, right? How do they connect with the ANS area? Right, in their story, maybe they talked about, this is something that they've grown up always doing as a trade or a hobby, or they saw like, Who knows? How do they connect with it? That's super important because that changes a lot of ways and gives us opportunity to really talk with them on their level on how they want to interact. Uh, as Shadowlanes, I really like how Master Fergus has phrased this previously. It's something that we do, whether we're brand new or as we kind of grow up and grow into the SCA more and more and more. It's always a good idea in your area to have a pool of guides, right? These are individuals who are really good. I don't know that I want to call them a subject matter expert in their area, but they're the individual who is really approachable. They're very knowledgeable and they know how to connect with other people in that area, right? So for ANS, you can have a pool of ANS guides, and a really good example. Our Kingdom ANS a year or so ago was a peer named Monique. She is awesome. She is conducting a lot of other classes today. I really look up to her. If I had a newbie that had approached and they want to double down on an ANS area that I have no idea about, my first step would to get her to, or him to Monique, or them to Monique. And then from there, Monique has a better pool of guides. So you always want to be thinking about what is the pool of individuals I can help connect them to? Is that me? Is that someone else? And we always try to make sure that it's not just one person that they can connect with, right? That there are multiple people. Next up, following up.
We
When you have a newcomer, oh, sorry, go for it.
question, are the
Yeah.
laurels not by default ANS guides?
Ooh, that's a really great question. People get to opt in and opt out if they want to be a guide, right? So you should always be having conversations about, do you feel comfortable with newcomers being referred to you, right? For us bridging that gap with you. There are some people inherently who are laurels or who are peers in general who they may or may not have a high degree of comfortability with that. And that needs to be respected. Who knows? Maybe that's something that they're working on or not. But a guide, by definition, is someone who has opted in to the action word of guiding. Right. So you probably everyone right now can think about two or three people, whether it's in practice or an event or people you just know in the SCA who are understand the real idea, the concept, the definition of a guide, right? They may not be peers, they may not be peers at all, but they're the really super friendly folks who are able to connect them with other people. And many of those people might be laurels, might be peers for sure, 100%. Um, but yeah, there is an aspect of opting into it. All right, any other questions? I love questions.
No, not yet.
All right, cool. Next up is we have following up. It is important to make newbies feel seen and to make newbies not only just feel seen, but feel seen and respected with their story. And one very easy way to do that is following up with them, right? Like, oh, hey, were you able to connect with this person?
We have
How,
a,
yeah, go for it.
as a newbie, I've observed that my ANS interests are pretty obscure
Mhm.
relatively. I've always wondered how to find others with similar or adjacent interests to mine so my ANS activities can really take off with connectivity to others.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you have interests that you're willing to A, share, and B, bring to a symposium like this. One of the things that I think is not necessarily utilized a lot is when we're doing symposiums like this, it is it should be encouraged during the networking hours, or gosh, I don't mind, classes like this where we can network, right? There are people across the known world who have chosen to join, and from there we can work to see if anybody else has similar interests, or we can also find you support to be mentored in how do you dig into the history, and maybe you were the founder of this area of ANS, So what are the areas that you're talking about? What is your story with regards to these areas?
That is not in comments, but we have another question.
Okay, cool. We'll come back to that.
Do they have to be the same kingdom? Have been totally torn down due to my outer area of embroidery, not Opus Angelica?
I'm not entirely sure that I understand the question, so I'm going to paraphrase. Please feel free in the chat to completely correct me. But it sounds like you may not have a good SCA support structure in your local kingdom. Is it okay to go outside of kingdom? And I think the general answer to that, not only from the interviewees, but from anyone I've ever spoken to in the SCA, is absolutely a resounding yes. Like if you're connecting with somebody in Meridies or Atlantia or Aidenveld or the West, and all you guys are sharing that passion of ANS, and they're being respectful, they're listening to your story. That's a great idea. Woohoo! Yeah, do it.
That's it for now.
Sweet. Okay. So following up is a really easy way to make newcomers feel seen. Okay. Not only are they feeling seen, but they are. Someone is remembering them. You are, whether you are overtly telling them that you are needed, you are wanted, we look forward to your participation. You are in the subtext by reaching out to them, asking them how they're doing, seeing if they're going to come to practice, checking in with them on their interests. You are making them feel that way. So following up, whether it be once, twice, three times, encouraging others to follow up with them is super important as long as it is within the person's boundaries, right? We never want to be, just like Icarus, you never want to fly too close to the sun. You never want to fly too close to the waves. So don't follow up like in a way that is, I'm going to follow up with you every day until I see you. Nay, like respect their communication boundaries and their communication preferences in that way, which you'll usually get a feel from that when they're talking about their story and as you start to interact with them more. Okay. Next, what the biggest way to respect someone's story and to really gauge, to be a detective of their enthusiasm and how they want to interact with the SEA is to not tell them to participate. We don't do that. We ask them, would you like to join me while I do blank? Or watch while I learn blank.
We
Okay.
have
Yeah, go for it.
we have a follow-up from Valeriano.
Yay.
I've been obsessed with plague doctors, historical public health, and past disease outbreaks because of the COVID pandemic.
For sure.
So have all of us.
Yeah.
Also an amateur polyglot to Romance languages, even obscure ones like Venetian.
Oh, that's super cool. That's excellent. I think there are a lot of individuals who would not only share those interests, but even outside of the SCA, those are really fascinating topics. Like, wow. So I would encourage you not only to reach out virtually, but I don't know that if I caught your kingdom before where you were from, but here inside the symposium, there are a lot of really great people who can likely help kind of dig in some of those areas. In the Kingdom of Atenvel, I definitely can forward your information if you opt to send it to me privately in chat or just use my Facebook link. We can get connected and I can connect you with Master Richard, who is one of the interviewees who helped us with this particular class. And I can also actually opt to connect you with Monique because she has an amazing list of extremely knowledgeable individuals who you likely could connect with. If not, she would be able to there. I can only speak for my kingdom. We could probably also reach out to some folks in Meridies. But certainly let's connect. I would love to hear more about your story and sharing your passion. Okay. Anything else right now? Any other questions? I love questions.
her persona is going to be or is a 17th century Venetian plague doctor. And that's
Ooh, man, that sounds so awesome. I
so
can't wait to see what that looks like and how you create that story.
caught up.
Sweet, awesome. So when we instead when we invite people to join us, they get to share in our experiences as the more seasoned SCA folks, right? So instead of asking newcomers, hey, why don't you go do this class on this ANS thing over here? There's an open seat. Um, Ask them to join you in, just to watch, right? Like, okay, cool. Even if you paid for the class, be like, all right, you can watch me do this thing. Um, and we can listen, right? Like, okay, cool. Or, watch me go up to a friend of mine at the SCA and I want to ask, them about blank, right? Watch while I learn this. Because inherently that gives them the opportunity to demystify whatever it is. Okay, if they do share interest, it gives them the opportunity. It gives you an inherent ability to respect their boundaries that you don't know what their boundaries are. What are they comfortable doing within the ANS sphere sometimes, right? Like somebody could sit down and be like, I'm super into beading. I'm super into leather work. And you're like, oh, that's great. Let me introduce you to this. You're in luck. They're doing a beading crafting half day over here. Let's go on over there. I've reserved you a seat. That could be super overwhelming for that person. You don't know. But if you were to change that into, hey, I'm going to go visit my friend while they're doing this beading day. Do you want to come with me? Then you give them this inherent ability to live in this non-committal space of, oh, sure, I can join you. And then they know they have a guide. They have a person who can ask questions to. They don't feel beholden in anyone to perform or participate in something they may be uncomfortable with. But then they also get more confident over time because now it is demystified. Oh, I did see that beading craft day. Now I know what it's like and what they're doing. Oh, I do want to do it the next time. Or maybe even halfway through, they're like, wow, I know I didn't necessarily prepare for this, but is there any way that I could participate? This looks really, really fun. I could we do that, right? And we have to be really good connoisseurs of the improv standard of yes, yes, and yes, let's go figure it out, right? Let's see if we can't find some free some materials, right? So respecting their story and using these skills are going to be super important as we get into the do's and don'ts. So now let's get into the do's, right? So you guys are working with ANS folks. That's great. That's wonderful. One of the biggest do's is to help coordinate and organize free ANS kits, whatever that looks like. They need to be easy to help people try, right? These are fun, small projects. You coordinate that the materials are free, or maybe the group event itself is free. It needs to be a not a high bar for entry, right? It cannot be viewed as a barrier for entry. All that needs to be viewed is this opportunity to maybe sit down and talk with people and play with something on the table, right? If we look at this in terms of adults going and playing, then the cost for entry must be non-existent for a newcomer right on the front, right? So do help organize and create free ANS kits. That's going to be easier in some areas, it's going to be harder in others. The point is to be creative, and to set up a healthy environment for people to try with ease. Okay. Do help organize and coordinate loaner ANS equipment, right? So sometimes it's really easy to set up a basic embroidery kit, right? Okay, sure. And I say that with experience in my little area that, we've gone through that process. We have some tips and tricks for that. It's a little bit harder to do that for a leather tooling, right? So then we talk about loaner ANS equipment. And when a newcomer shows up and they're like, hey, I'm really into leather. I'm a student. I'm a college student. I don't have any of the funds. We're not going to talk about cost. We're going to talk about, wow, I know two or three other people who also do tooling leather. I have a previous relationship with them in which I know that they are able to loan you equipment to do that, right? Some leather tools, maybe a small granite slab, right? Like, so being able to talk with other people who, sure, they could be peers, they could be just individuals who are super interested in leather armor or leather crafting, doesn't really matter, whatever that niche is, and being aware in your area, oh, hey, this person is totally comfortable with doing that, right? So that means that you have to have those conversations with the people in your barony or in your kingdom or in your general area of, hey, I am comfortable with having loaner ANS equipment and working with newbies that way. Okay. And it's also perfectly fine to encounter people who are not comfortable with that. Okay. Next up, do listen to the new person's story and approach them with your experience cup empty. All right, I want everybody right now, metaphorically, right? But you can physically hold out your hands, put them into a cup bowl. In it, I want you to put in all of your experience about a certain topic. I don't need to know what that topic is. Okay, it might not even deal with ANS, right? And then I want you to dump it out. Because here's the reality. There are newcomers, very much like the individual that we've been having questions from. They could have done a lot of research. They could have had 25, 15, it doesn't matter, an X amount of years of experience in leather crafting, metalwork, blacksmithing. And only now they're finding the SCA. And you're not going to know unless you listen to their story, right? And so one of the biggest traps that we have identified from the interviewees is that they're the trap of, oh, let me teach you everything that you need to know about a subject without listening to, hey, I actually have some blacksmithing experience. Hey, I actually have some experience in leather work or beading or this. Let me tell you about it. And then once they tell you or the guides about that, their experience, as long as you have dumped your experience cup out, they fill that cup and now you know where to integrate them a little bit more, right? Maybe it's inappropriate to suggest that, oh, well, this is an intro class on beading and sewing over here. Actually, gosh, I think you should really share your experience and your interests with this individual. She coordinates these classes or he coordinates these classes. And with that subtle change, you're telling the newcomer, I've heard you. I am not going to try to make your experience conform to what our standards are, right? Or what I assume that you can do by looking at you. And we still want your participation. Gosh, you may even have something to teach us. Okay. Next, use as many modern words as possible when introducing concepts and items or communicating to them. So here's a really good example. We have, in the SCA, we have our own lexicon. And the more and more we participate, the more and more that we participate, we tend to use that lexicon in our everyday language such that we don't even recognize it anymore. So here's a good example of that. One that's actually super salient because we're in an event and we have an autocrat, right? So when we say autocrat, most folks outside of the SCA have no idea what we're talking about. And then in a good attempt to demystify what an autocrat is, we say event steward. However, if you were to look up the word, the lexical definition, dictionary definition of steward, we're still using it in a non-current diction form. So then if I were to say an event coordinator, 100% of the people on this call know exactly what that is. Right? So when we're communicating ANS craft concepts or items or things, and we're walking people through, this passion that maybe you both share. It is important to lead that conversation with, hey, if I am ever talking about something that just doesn't make sense, or I'm using a word that you have no idea what it is, please stop me. Tell me right then. I have no ego in it, right? Like, interrupt me. I promise I'll pick right back up where I started, but it is important for you to know what we're talking about. And it's important for me to know maybe what's a word that I think everybody knows about, but it's not really something that everybody knows about. Okay. All right. Next up, give constructive feedback that is positive with areas of growth. And this is very important when they are ready for feedback. And when they are ready for feedback, we need to unpack that a little bit. People in general, when we are walking around day to day doing our lives, if someone were to just come up to us at the grocery store, Home Depot, Starbucks, and they give us feedback, we are not ready for it. It will likely be a negative interaction. The vast majority of the time, when we receive constructive feedback about an art, a hobby, an interest, a passion, we need to be in the mindset of receiving that feedback, okay, of being prepared for it. So, across all of the interviewees, it came up of when an individual, a newcomer who is really working with you says, hey, what do you think? Right? Can you give me some feedback? I want to grow. Like, first of all, you have to wait for that moment because they're initiating that feedback loop to grow. That's great. That's awesome. And then B, you always want to check in. Is this a good time for feedback? How do you like feedback best? I think what you're doing is amazing. I'd like to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. Is Let me know when you're comfortable with that. It's also perfectly fine for newcomers to say, I'm not comfortable with that right now. And so maybe the feedback that they're asking about or that they're looking for is more motivational in nature of, you know what? I see you doing all of the things that you wanted to do and trying your hardest and talking to people and trying new techniques. Well done. That is its own level of feedback. Okay. All right. Give correct and thorough information about the craft if you are able, or connect them to a guide, right? Do not feel as if you are in a position where you have to know everything. Absolutely not. It is perfectly fine for you to say, I have no idea. I've never done that before. Wow, that's cool. Um, I think I hear someone in the background. Do you guys have a question? I just want to check in because I can talk for a long time.
There are two statements.
Sweet.
Valeriano says, it's taken me a bit to learn SCA jargon. The
Yep.
deer is not equal to you in status. A pelican is not just a bird. A vigil is something for someone who has passed, is not something for someone who has passed away. And
Right.
Sherry says the word planner is a good substitute. And we're caught up.
Planner is a good substitute. You like event planner, like event coordinator? Yeah, that makes sense. You want to use modern words that communicate, what the autocrat is doing without using jargon or words that are not used 90% of the time, right? Now, that's going to change, by the way, geographically. And that's something that's hard, right? When we're conducting a known world symposium, we're talking about the entire world, right? What this looks like in your everyday lives is the words that are used in your geographical area or the people that you're talking with, right? Like if you're on Discord and you're talking with the known world in two different continents, you guys might have to agree on some terms so that you know what that is. Maybe there is a truly lexical difference between planner and coordinator between two countries. That makes sense. You may want to talk about that, right? But having a safe environment to talk about that language and to dig into all of the different duties that an autocrat would perform, what, for you in your culture, in your geographic region, what would you define that? Is that a planner? Is that a coordinator? Is that a master of events? Like how does that work? Languages work differently, and cultures even more different. Gosh, I hope that I helped. All right. So we were on do, give correct and thorough information about the craft if you are able. Okay. So, or connect them with a guide. Do not feel pressure to feel I have to know all of the crafts. Absolutely not. No, 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 nay, nay. That's not a thing. No, thank you. It's perfectly fine. And you should feel empowered to say, I don't know. Oops. But let's go find somebody who does, right? And to bring them with you on the journey to go find someone. They're going to meet more people, right? And it doesn't matter who you meet at a certain point, right? Like you should never feel ashamed or embarrassed to be like, hey, I don't know who, but I know the queen over there does know. So come here, let me introduce you to the queen. Let's go. Right? Or to peers or to all of that, because they will be able to help connect you. And to be honest, the vast majority of the time when you bring a new person to be introduced to other people, by definition of introducing them, there is a level of support and then follow up that usually occurs from the people who they introduce them to. So that's kind of cool too. All right. Do help them understand the requirements of competitions and documentation. The don't slide is coming up next, but there's a big don't of do not push people into competitions, do not push them into showcases if they don't want to, or if they're hesitant about it. Just don't do it. But there is a do of, as newcomers begin to understand what options are available to them and they start to really dig into their ANS craft, they're likely going to produce these truly pretty to them and pretty to other people things. Wow, that's pretty, right? But I think traditionally our answer or response to that has been, it's pretty. You should put that in a showcase. Oh, that's so pretty. Um, you should put that in a competition. But we need to pull back from that, because when you put things into a competition or a showcase, you are openly inviting a level of conversation that the newcomer may not be ready for. So in a effort to avoid that, right, you want to help them understand what the requirements of competitions are and documentation, and what the expected SCA, what I'm going to refer to professional feedback loop, looks like, right? In our kingdom, there are expectations that if you enter into a competition and there is documentation requirements, then the panel of judges should write on your documentation or should give you constructive feedback on your documentation, one, and then also on your craft, right? Now, in your kingdom, the expectations may be a little bit different, and that's fine, but it is our responsibility to help connect newcomers with either the person who can help them understand the requirements of competitions and documentation, or it is our responsibility to help communicate that if we are aware of it, right? So part of being a chatelaine is being a conduit. I think, like, number one, we're always the respectful, accepting, kind, and enthusiastic individual that is welcome to connect. On the next level, we are a conduit, and then after that, we are there to be present and to bear witness to their awesomeness, right? And to see their hero's journey through. So, okay. Now, next we have do, help them try ANS areas that they are interested in, right? So that is kind of links back to the very, very top, right? Where even if they're midway into, oh, leather crafting, but then they see this really cool leather crafting and sewing, combination, it's okay to say, hey, do you feel comfortable if, I suggest, maybe you should go try some sewing stuff. You know, like you keep these are pictures. You're bringing me these really awesome integration pictures of things you want to do that are they've got this leather component, then they've got this sewing component to it, you know, with fabrics. Wow, you know, maybe you should go if you're comfortable, maybe you should go talk to Elizabeth. She's really awesome at sewing, and I wonder if she'd be able to help bridge that gap between the two, right? So always feel free to have that conversation with them and make sure that you're relying on the idea and the concepts of guides, kits, and loaner sets, right? And anything else that can be used to help prop them up. Um, Lastly, do let them know that everyone makes mistakes. Everyone and every craft has a learning curve. I love working with leather. I do. I do. And anytime I ever talk with a new person who loves leather and wants to learn more about it, you know, I always start with, oh man, I've made so many mistakes. And to date, I will continue to make mistakes. And we need to abolish the idea that you're going to be good right off the bat, or taking 2 or 3 classes will make you good right off the bat. No, 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 no. No one is good at anything when they first start. And the expectation is you're going to start at the level of experience that you have, and we're going to respect and celebrate whatever that experience level is. And that mistakes are not a bad thing. They're an excellent thing because that they help you grow. Okay? So, that is the list of do's. Do's are awesome. Now, let's look at the exact opposite. What's the list of don'ts? Okay?
They
Yeah, go for it.
have a comment. I view
Yeah.
as tour guides to a new and maybe foreign world and culture, the known world in the SCA culture specifically.
Wow, that's such a great way to look at it. Yeah, I've heard Chatelaines form viewed as tour guides. I've also heard Chatelaines viewed as scuba instructors, diving instructors. Yeah, because sometimes when you're talking with newcomers, it's like, here, put on this suit. You know, here's your air tank, right? Let's go deep dive into this other culture, and then we'll come back up for air if you need. So yeah, that's a really great. I love it. Tour guide. Oh yeah, for sure. That's excellent. All right, guys. So here are the don'ts. Okay, and we're gonna go over these real quick because once we talk about the do's, the don'ts become very apparent. Don't assume they have no experience in blank, right? To be honest, don't assume anything. That's super fair. How do you get step away from assuming stuff? That's because you listened to their story. Them telling their story helps fill in the things that you would have assumed. And if you have a lot of blanks, then the answer should be, oh, gosh, tell me more about this from your perspective. Tell me more about this. And that'll be excellent, right? Okay, next, don't assume they will or will not like something, right? So in the do's, we talked a lot about checking in with them. Hey, would you like me to connect you with this? I see, you know, that you're incorporating these different ANS materials or these mediums, and gosh, you know, they may be able to answer more information for you. Or are you interested in this? Right? Or X or Y or Z, right? We don't want to assume what they want to do or what they don't want to do, what they will or will not like. We want them to be the commander in chief of their own SCA story. Okay. Don't push newcomers into competitions. Maybe showcases, but really you need to gauge the comfortability of the newcomer on that. The reality is we do not want to push them into a situation where they are going to be uncomfortable with the level of feedback or integration of their ANS level with other people, right? So it's totally okay if they genuinely want to and you've braced them and you've talked with them and they're aware of all of the things. Cool, let's fly, let's go. If they don't push them, if they show no interest, right? Like if somebody just wants to grow in their art and they have zero, like they haven't talked about it, they haven't been interested in visiting competitions and looking, they just want to learn the thing. Cool, then just let them learn the thing. That's respecting their story. That's respecting their boundary. Okay, yeah, go for it.
One don't I can instantly think of that stunted me was somebody assuming that I instantly wanted to be an ANS beer. So
Oh, yeah,
they pushed me to find a laurel when I was just dabbling.
for sure. For sure. Yeah, don't assume. Don't assume. That is a really excellent don't assume. Don't assume that, anyone wants to be a peer in any level. Newcomers are, believe it or not, humans are really, really good at talking about their passions. I know, right? It's crazy. So crazy. I mean, visit any SCA people that you know and love and be like, tell me about this one thing that you love. You'll be there all day. So when newcomers stumble upon a passion and they're thinking about peerage after asking questions and getting to understand the concepts a little bit more, right? Like they'll tell you. They'll totally tell you. Like it's not a secret. It's not just gonna magically happen. They'll tell you, right? So let them guide their own story. I 100% agree with that. Okay. So now we have don't give inappropriate feedback. Oh man. I don't want to get too much into this because I think we've all had a sense of what inappropriate feedback is, but let me get the definite tip of the iceberg of what inappropriate feedback looks like. Okay. Inappropriate feedback. It's not the right time, it's not the right space, and they're not ready for it. Okay. So if someone does not get into a showcase, does not want to participate in a showcase, does not want to participate in a competition, and someone wants to give them feedback, well, that may not be appropriate, right? Like if they're not putting themselves in an obvious socially acceptable place that's advertising, hey, I kind of want a level of feedback on this, then don't do it, right? There is, unless that person comes up to him and is like, hey, I'd love to talk to you about this thing, that is appropriate, right? Then it's putting the response, the respect and the boundaries in their control of how they want to interact with feedback. But if someone just goes up to them out of the blue and is like, hey, I really want to talk to you about your leather work. I see your edges are unfinished. I see this. I see that. Gosh, why don't you come over to my shop and we'll really fix it? That's inappropriate. And that can really set some people back because it wasn't the right time. It's not the right space. They may not have been looking for it in the first place, and they just wanted to dabble. They just wanted to do the thing. And we need to give them that space and that boundary to just do the thing. Okay. It's all negative, right? Feedback shouldn't, appropriate feedback is not all negative. Appropriate feedback is the good, the hey, you can improve here, this is an opportunity for growth here. That's it. That is appropriate feedback. Okay. When we start getting into negative feedback of, wow, that looks weird. That's not, nope. That's bail, tap out. That's not appropriate. Okay. Nobody in the history of any time wants someone else to come up to them and be like, wow, that looks weird. What? No, that's not the people we are. We don't want that done to us, and we don't want to share that with other people. Okay. Um, Lastly, mismeeting them at their level of participation, right? And that actually hollers back to the comment that we just received. The level of participation that person was talking about is they just wanted to dabble, right? And so that person who was pushing them to meet laurels and to become, I think it's a protege for them. I'm not entirely sure, but to go down that path missed meeting them at their level of participation. Blech, I'm getting tongue tied. Sorry, guys. Okay. So you need to meet them at their level of participation for appropriate feedback, right? Because if somebody is truly just making a leather bracer because A, they wanted to, and B, they're just dabbling, and C, they don't care, it is probably like maybe they're going half historically, somewhat in that realm, and then maybe half cosplay. That's their level of participation. That's cool. They're not submitting it for competition. Maybe they do or do not want to put in a showcase, whatever. But their level of participation is sets the standard for what the feedback is. Right? If you have someone who is very open and very communicative of my level of participation is I want to be a laurel and I want to be a laurel in this historical area with this thing, then your feedback can meet them at their level of participation. But if you have someone, a newcomer who's joining and they're super into Assassin's Creed or Xena Warrior Princess or D&D or LARPing, like all of that is fine. But you meet them at their level of participation. Okay. All right. I know we're clicking through time real quick here. So we do not talk about cost up front. We don't. These are newcomers, right? We are an amazing group of individuals who are super willing to find loaner gear, get loaner gear, work on, gathering supplies so that people can use them and try stuff out. We are a community of givers and sharers. We do not talk about cost up front. Once somebody starts to really dig in to an area that they like, and then they start talking about, oh, I think I want to do more of this at home, and thank you so much for helping and providing these things, but I think I want to do this outside of just this cool little event. Gosh, where did you find this? How much did it cost, right? And then you can start to tiptoe, but you let them lead, right? Let them lead there. Let them start that conversation of, gosh, how much does this cost and where? And where we as professional chatelaines or conduits or tour guides, what we're going to do is we're going to connect them with maybe somebody who isn't using theirs right now, or somebody who's going to sell it, maybe if it's super expensive, not at cost, right? Like we give them a tour guide version of, here are all the different places that you may be able to buy this thing. Always know real life comes first, and B, always know that you should feel empowered to do what is financially appropriate for you at all times. Okay. Always focus on loaner equipment or focus on stuff that does not incur cost. Okay. uh Last thing, do not push newcomers into doing all of the things right away. All right. I know my generation of the SCA and probably a few generations older than me, that was kind of a motto: do all the things, do it all. You'll figure out what works. Do it all. Okay. That's very overwhelming and totally can be a high reason for burnout. Okay. Neither is appropriate, right? It doesn't mean you can't have that level of enthusiasm if you meet someone who also shares that drive. That's super cool. There is legitimately probably some newcomers who have that in drive, that enthusiasm, that motivation, and they're not going to get overwhelmed and they may not suffer burnout from it. That's fine. They may be the exception to the rule, though. So until you need to back up and you need to not push newcomers to doing all of the things. Newcomers need to follow their dopamine, follow what makes them happy. Then we're going to start to get into some really great spaces. Okay. All right. Q&A time, guys. Right on time, 2:49. Oh, man. It's like I practiced. I did. So I tried. I tried real hard. I'm a card-carrying member of the Try Hard Club.